Let me say that Goshen is a place in time. Earlier, when God deals with us, God deals with us at a particular place, with a particular group of people, and at a particular time. And that's what happens at Goshen that you've got to understand. It's a place in time. It's a condition. It's a condition that you find yourself in. So it's not like just an imagination. It's a condition that my condition right now is a Goshen condition. It's protected, it's preserved, it's provided for. And it's a realm and it's an attitude. Many of us keep having this attitude that is outside Goshen. When you're in Goshen, you mustn't always be found amongst those who are murmuring. Goshen has a different attitude altogether. It's a condition of contentment. I don't want to use the word satisfaction because satisfaction is driven by a particular need which is always changing. But contentment means that it doesn't matter whether you have or you don't have. You're content in that situation. So it's a place of contentment. Yet, Goshen is a place of God's presence. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about God's protection in Goshen. How are you going to get protected? How do you move in that protection? And then God's provision. And then we're going to talk about God's promises. Because Goshen is not a place of permanence. It's transitory. So don't get too comfortable. Get equipped and get ready to move again. And then God's period. Sometimes we don't understand the season or the period that God is taking us through. And we must understand when we're in Goshen, it is a season, it is a period where we are saying, oh yeah, there is a lot of grace, or there is an abundant grace about the things that you're doing. Some of us will be doing certain things wrong. In some cases, because of God's grace or abundant grace, it appears as though God overlooks some of your wrongs. Moses cried out in Exodus chapter 33, verse 15 to 16. Then he said to him, if your presence does not go with us, do not bring us up from here. For how then will it be known that your people and I have found grace in your sight, except you go with us? So we shall be separate, your people and I, from all the people who are upon the face of the earth. Moses, this cry was not natural for him. He was never always crying for the presence of God. But when he got into a certain encounter with God, he realizes that the only thing that matters to him is not the money, the food, it's not the job, it's not the role or the title. It was nothing, it was just the presence of God. So he cries out, he says, look, if your presence does not go with us, do not take us from here. Without God. Now, some of us complicate this whole presence of God and think that it's a feeling. You know how people think, I was just so much in the presence of God and I just fell. No, that is one of the events that happens when you're in the presence of God. Sometimes the presence of God, there is no activity that then happens. It is the conviction. It is the understanding. It is the knowledge that God is here with me. Therefore, that conviction, understanding, knowledge leads to a behavior that tells you that this man, this woman is walking in the presence of God. So you can get close to people. You can be amongst people. And you can sense the presence of God. There is a sweetness. It's a presence that doesn't attack you. It embraces you. Because God is not out there to just frighten. You know how people in the prison, hallelujah, and then people just start being afraid to get close to you. You don't have to do that. The presence of God is sweet. The presence of God is liberating. The presence of God is empowering. The presence of God is loving. There is a presence that allows you to find God more rather than to be condemned into your situation. It's not the presence of God when you feel condemned. And I'm just saying the presence of God is already in you. Let me not just say it's an outward thing. It's not an outward thing. It's an inward thing. Because the Holy Spirit, the incorruptible seed, is now part of you and is in you. So it is just the mere expression. You can stifle the presence of God, but He's there. No, He is always present. But the presence of God in you is when you actualize it and say, look, I acknowledge. When you're in a mess, he's there. Acknowledge that I'm in a mess. Holds your hand, pulls you out. When you're happy as well, he's also doing the somersaults with you. Many of us think the presence of God is a punishing experience. It's not a punishing. There is fullness of joy. And he says, at your right hand, there are pleasures forevermore, which means there are things that excite me. Because we think the presence of God is punishing yourself all the time. Oh, for me to get into the presence of God, I'm going to have to fast and pray. No. Perfecting yourself is a process of dealing with yourself. It is not in any way I'm twisting God. Just in case you thought that will. Because there are many people who fast and are never in the presence of God. Because they've not acknowledged. You're just starving yourself to death. Go out there and eat. And then acknowledge the presence of God. Then you can fast. Otherwise, you're just punishing yourself for nothing. Because God is not arm twisted by fasting. But some of us, because we lack the presence of God in our daily encounters, we are always victims to the situations. When you carry the presence of God, there is a favor that comes with it. There is a package that comes with the presence of God. A threshing floor is very much in the open. In fact, at that time, all threshing floors had been destroyed by the Midianites. So he had to find another place to thresh wheat to provide for his family. So there was absolutely nothing that was looking beyond the wheat he was threshing. He wasn't looking forward to another 10 years. So when God chooses him, he is in a pathetic situation like all of us are right now in our nation. We're seeking food. We wake up tomorrow looking for money for food. That's all. Summed up, our daily struggle is, how am I going to feed myself and the children and those around me? That is it. We are no longer involved in how do we bless the next generation? How do we impact the nation? How do we impact the region? How do we impact the whole globe? How do we bless others? No, we are looking for food. We are very consumptive now. There has been marauding Midianites and Amalekite spirit that has come across our nation. That we are now being forced to only look for food. And then when we find it, we process it in the wrong place. Now, you've got to understand, there is another thing that God revealed to me here. That was the black market of the day. We have already started seeing the behavior. Towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, guess what's happening? With the arrival of bond notes and so on, and the US dollar not, being found anywhere. People have already gone into the black market of the day. So we are threshing wheat in the wine press. And we are unable to celebrate what we are achieving because we are achieving it in the wrong place. If the Lord is with us, why is our country in such a mess? So many of us will continue to live with mediocrity, will continue to live with substandard behavior around us because we are afraid and we have not understood the presence of God in our lives. Here, Gideon accommodated all this or began to understand that this is it. There's no presence here. Let's just leave us alone with our threshing of wheat in the winepress. Leave us alone. No, he moved on. And even if he was going to move to the next level, he was still going to be afraid. The bottom line is that Gideon was afraid in the beginning. He was afraid in the middle. He was afraid till the end. How do you think he felt? He says, you're going to fight the Midianites. And Gideon, being Gideon, he's so afraid. He believes in numbers. Now, the presence of God has nothing to do with numbers. Don't ever come to church and say, look, I'm going to the church because there's going to be many of us. There will be a bigger presence. No, the presence is with you. So it's never in numbers. So Gideon, in his natural behavior, then recruited 32,000. I mean, this is an army. And then God says, shrink it. Not to 30,000. Not even to 20,000. Not even to 1,000. To 300. If I was Gideon again, I would even be more afraid. But God knew that he was still afraid. But God emphasized one thing. Even if you're afraid, I am with you. So I'm not saying you might not be afraid. There will be moments you will be afraid. You do something, you say something, you encounter certain situations, you are quite afraid. But in that moment, just say, look, even when I am afraid, he is with me. Sometimes when we are afraid, we develop a crutch. That crutch can be a relationship. That crutch can be a habit. That crutch can be a possession that you have. But God, in his own mercy and grace, he understands that that crutch is not where your strength is going to come from. He understands that the emphasis is not to talk too much about the crutch. The emphasis is to talk about the presence of God and what he is going to do for you. So he keeps emphasizing. And he says, by the way, if you're still afraid and if you feel that you need your servant, your crutch with you, take it down with you. But just know that's not where the solution lies. Some of us still have crutches even when we're afraid. And it takes us longer to let go of the crutch. But guess what will take the crutch away very quickly? Your acknowledgement of the presence of God.